Welcome to the first episode of the Better Band Bureau podcast.
You're listening to the Better Band Bureau podcast, the number one online resource for DIY bands to learn about the music business and touring. If you want to turn your band into a lean, mean touring machine, you're in the right place. Now, let's get this show on the road.
All right, welcome to the Better Band Bureau podcast. I'm James, I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with Aaron, your other co-host, from the band Suburban Samurai. How's it going, man?
Hello. Good. How's it going today?
Yeah, I'm having a great day, and I'm stoked to get this project off the ground. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's super awesome.
We have an interesting topic today, which is probably a bit heavy for some people, but other people might really enjoy it, which is the reality of professional touring versus vacation. Because a lot of DIY bands who haven't done professional touring might kind of think of touring as being this big party or big vacation. And unfortunately, that's typically not the reality, which it would be nice if it was, but it is work. And so we want to talk about that and kind of set expectations, but also help you get through some of the hurdles and challenges that DIY tours are somewhat prone to. Mm-hmm. And that way give you the expectation of what to expect on your first DIY tour or even your 10th DIY tour. And so, Aaron, you have a bit of experience with both.
Yeah.
And so do I. Not quite as much experience on DIY touring, to be honest, but getting things going and looking at it from both sides of the pictures. Before we get started, is there any one thing that you think stood out as the biggest difference between your professional tours and your DIY tours with Suburban Samurai?
So if I had to pick one thing that was sort of like a difference between the two,
yeah,
I'd say, it sounds like we might kind of get into this in more detail later, or maybe perhaps on a future episode, but sort of in a very, very brief, kind of Spark Notes version. My situation or order of operations was sort of unique in that I knew what I wanted to do and what world I wanted to be a part of. And so I just started sort of involving myself in that world. And then sort of where, the funny version of PEMDAS came in, I was a part of, like a larger festival tour before I started kind of ramping up activity with my own band. And I was a part of a couple of other, I'd done some other things before I kind of backed off and sort of assessed where I was with my musical group and, what I can take from the larger tours and apply to my own and kind of... So I did a bunch of stuff before I kind of rolled it all back and started touring with my own band. I'd say the one difference, if I had to pick one, can I pick a funny one and then a real one?
Might as well.
What you eat is probably one, or what's available, I'd say.
Yeah.
I think in my situation, maybe not so much because I'm lucky and I have a good group of guys in my band with me. But, nutshell overall, I'd imagine one sort of overarching difference that people, maybe finding with their experience would be like the intent of the people to the left and to the right of them, sort of the overall mindset, and sort of, just kind of the why people are there, which sort of, I don't know, ties directly into sort of your, the lead into the novel that I just blad out my mouth.
So you're kind of thinking of the difference between people who maybe there's a band and one of the members wants to do music as a career and the other one just wants to have a good time and hang out and drink beer, and somebody else wants to play music as a hobby because they love playing music, but they also have a really steady full-time job at home and they're happy with that. Something like that?
I think so. I want to be very clear in stating I don't think there's anything wrong, and I don't think either one of us would say there's anything wrong with any of those like things, outlooks, or how somebody's coming into like playing in a band or tour managing a bit or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's when and where there are like misalignments that sort of aren't clearly communicated, or if somebody's reason for being somewhere isn't sort of like an open you don't have to talk about it all the time. Then you probably, bore yourself out of your gourd. But, if you're just not honest about those things, it could get a little hairy. And I think maybe part of that is a lot of people don't recognize that that's something that should be discussed. I've had the great fortune of spending a lot of time with people who take what they do very seriously, because it's, it could be a range of, either that's their passion and that's what they want to do, and it's as simple as that. And that's kind of, where I was for a long time in terms of like production work. And then it runs the gambit. There are people who it's like, well, don't mess with this. This is how I'm paying for my kids' college, or like this is how I like pay my rent and like buy my groceries. You know what I mean? Like, it's and these are people our age, maybe a little younger, all the way through retirement age. People who are like, there are lifers out there, and it's you don't mess with, like, that's their job is what it comes down to, is like that's their job, and it's hard work. And they take what they do seriously. And so I was very fortunate in having that mindset as sort of like what I had modeled my sort of like fabric of being after, and I still do. And so like after, I'd spent a good amount of time kind of operating in that pro world. It makes me sound like elitist or something, but it's what it was. Arena touring, and I sort of backed off, and I found myself either with the time or with the wherewithal, whatever, to start working a lot more with my own band and kind of kickstart that, and kind of DIY it, and which just means. I was told I forget who it was, but somebody had told me DIY isn't so much do it yourself as like decide it yourself, because you obviously know as well as I do, we have just as many resources as anybody else anywhere, with the internet and all that. But there are a lot of people.
Equalizer.
Yeah. And again, I feel like it's like totally monologuing. I don't mean to, but so there are those people who it's like, this is what I do. This is my work. I enjoy it. Yeah, hopefully I do, but it's my work. You have those people, and then you have the people. You still have screw ups in that world, and but they get sent home fairly quickly.
Yeah.
But there's less of a single overarching like understanding in the world of DIY touring. That's been my experience, because so many people are coming at it from so many directions, with so many, like, all their backgrounds are different in terms of like experience or where they're from or what they're doing. If they're an audio guy, but they're kind of like DIYing it, or a band member, or somebody who's like, I want to tour manage, but like, how do I like, am I going to tour manage a DIY band? How does that work? And I think you could probably speak to that a bunch. But so a lot of those people, because there are so many more variables as a part of that, there are people with varying, I don't know what to call that, but I think you get the picture. Motives, I guess, motives.
Yeah. I think motives is a great word for that. Or the mental picture that I was building kind of was people with just varying life stories. Like, you never know what their motivation might be to be out there. Mm-hmm. But in the end, you're all working for one common goal, which is to put on a really good show. There's a different way of looking at the music industry, I think, than anything else. Like, with the music industry, if you're touring, the one and only goal is to put on a show. Like, okay, you have to get to the next show too, but it's all about putting on a show. Whereas if you look at anything else, like a store or an insurance company, like, they have so many minor goals with so many different customers, and each customer has their own individual product. Essentially, like, no one who goes to Walmart is going to walk out with the exact same shopping cart as somebody else at the end of their shopping trip. Like,
that's a good one. Yeah.
I guess you could argue maybe somebody walks in and buys one item like that. Yeah. But if you have like 20 different items, the odds of those 20 items being the same that somebody else is buying that at that same store, that's just astronomically, the odds are against it. But with a show, the product is the show, and you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people all there for that one same product.
Yeah.
And there are many, many, many people working on creating that product, which I guess we should call a service, not a product.
Sure.
But
yeah.
there are so many people creating that service together. The artist is just the tip of the iceberg, and they're the person that the people are there to see.
Yeah,
But-
the executor maybe.
Exactly.
Or the, but not even the only one. You got the lighting guy or the
Yeah.
video guy or.
Now I'm thinking of just like the artist swinging a giant axe, which I mean, guitars are called axes too in some circles. So there you go. But it's just a different model. All these people are here for this one thing, whereas insurance companies, so many different plans. Or you go to the store, so many different items. It's like you're going to a show for this one specific thing. And I suppose you could say that, okay, movie theaters are kind of the same. But then again, they're multiplexes. They have like 10, 15 different movies. I think probably the closest would be Broadway shows.
I'd buy that. Yeah.
Because that's kind of what they're doing. But they're also doing it in the same location every single night for however long the run is.
Yeah.
Whereas with tours, it's like, okay, there's one show in your state, and people drive from 3, 4, 5 hours around,
And
depending
we've
on.
got to replicate as close to the same thing as we can under maybe like very different conditions.
Definitely. And that's,
outside tomorrow and we were inside today, or
yeah.
you know.
There's just so much that goes into it that people don't realize.
I don't know if I'm happy that you specifically and it's like totally joking, Walmart model, because fight the man or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's joke. But like I'm like, seriously though, I'm happy you brought up business model. Like Walmart or an insurance company, or like I'm a fan of like sort of trying to tether together the idea of what it is to be in a band to the idea of what it is to source and purchase office space or cooking space and turn that into like a cupcake business or like a deli, you know? Because like another good point kind of stemming off from what you were saying, and I don't, maybe you were getting to this, was, it's the difference, sometimes it's the difference between needing to look ahead versus, oh, that was fun. And I don't think that's just like inside music, outside music. It's like, maybe that's a discussion whoever you are who's listening to this right now, hopefully need to have with your own group. It's an expectation that would be worth exploring. Do you want to invest in yourself and kind of like in a cyclical way? Like I've got something that I did yesterday, I have something I'm doing today, I have something that I'm planning on doing next month, and I'm just thinking about the thing that's going to happen 6 months from now, or versus the like one and done like model. And maybe that's sort of what you were saying is in terms of like the ways that I don't want to say the word big business, but like any business, the way that those people have to think. It's interesting to sort of recognize like where you see that in entertainment and where you don't. And maybe most excitingly, like where you see that like that gear just starting to turn in like that young band that's like, oh, I'm going to do this because that'll let me do this in a more efficient way, or maybe I should think of it like, it's great we just got a van, but what are we doing with it?
Yeah. And that's why we're here. Like we're trying to help DIY artists with the Better Band Bureau by saying, hey, this is how you can push forward your career. And so that's one of the reasons I asked Aaron to be co-host of this podcast, because Aaron has so much experience from both sides, both on the professional like arena tour level, as well as his own DIY band. And I'm sure there are other people out there, but Aaron has taken Suburban Samurai so seriously. I know in the past you've told me about like the spreadsheets you have, and I'm just impressed by all the data you're tracking from your shows. Yeah, which is something that probably like 1% of DIY bands do. I would assume it's a very, very small percentage of DIY bands, and that percentage of those who do that are the ones who are most likely to succeed. Another example, I would say, shout out to Pickwick Commons. They are a really successful DIY touring band.
Well, you did like a 2 or 3 part sort of series on it. It was those guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. They co-manage the band. If you want to go check out that video series, it'll be in the show notes for this episode. But they're very successful about it because of the way they go about it. And one of the things that I thought was most interesting is they don't do any tour over 2 weeks long. They always just do 2 weeks, and they'll say, okay, we're going to the north for 2 weeks. We're going to the east for 2 weeks. And they kind of build that around there because realistically for them, they're in Indiana, which is the Midwest. They can go 2 weeks to the east, and they have the whole eastern seaboard. They can go 2 weeks to the south, and they have Texas, Florida, all that kind of stuff. 2 weeks to the west, and there's some really long drives, but they can get to California and back in 2 weeks and play a show almost every night.
Or to the north if they've got their passports.
Yeah, go to Canada. When they came through Vermont here, they had just come from Montreal. So
that's awesome.
They're definitely playing shows up there. I think they had 2 or 3 shows in Canada on that run. That's a great example of a band who's harnessing statistics and marketing techniques. They're using Facebook advertising and retargeting and that kind of stuff. But that's totally a rabbit hole because we're talking about something else here today, which is just what to expect on a DIY tour and why the rock star life, even at the biggest level, is probably not the rock star life that you expect or see portrayed in movies. I guess a good example here would be the movie Almost Famous. Have you seen that, Aaron?
I'm about to get this wrong, but I have this picture in my head of Chris Farley, and it's set in 100 years ago, or they were. It doesn't sound like that's it.
I'm so awful with names of actors. I wouldn't even be able to tell you.
I don't think I'm getting that right.
She was in it. She was the big sister, and the mom was Frances McDormand. Yeah, it's about a 70s touring band, how their rise to fame came about, kind of.
Was it based on somebody's actual story, or was it sort of,
Cameron Crowe, he directed it, and it was semi-autobiographical.
That's cool.
And it was a great movie, and maybe in the 70s that's what touring was like. But you don't seriously see artists standing on the roof of a house screaming, "I am a golden god," before they jump into a pool off the roof of the house. That's not something that happens anymore. It's 2019.
Or they could, but I'm just going to hate them so much when I see that video on their Instagram.
Real life sometimes imitates art, but I think art typically does not imitate real life, at least when it comes to portraying music tours and rock stars. And again, no offense to Cameron Crowe. Maybe back in the 70s, that's how it was. But in 2019, that's just not how touring goes. I'm horrible with tangents and rabbit holes. You need to keep me on a leash, James. But just a quick shout out to, I think there's a movie with Patrick Stewart in it. Have you seen this? Where it's speaking of again, bad with names.
Star Trek, and he's Professor X, and I think it's called Green Room. I would suggest, if you want to get really scared about what you're about to do, if you've just booked your band's first DIY tour and you want to have the whatever scared out of you, go watch that. I think it's on Hulu. I've watched it a few times, and I kind of look at it and laugh because it's so ridiculous. But I'm sure it could totally. It's like DIYers who siphon gas from people's parked cars at Walmart to get to the next gig. But then they get this show in some middle of nowhere, and it's a bunch of really bad people that you don't want to play we're all equal, go everybody together kind of music towards, if you sort of get my where I'm going with that. But I always think that's funny to
That'll definitely be on my watch list. I have not seen that, but it sounds hilarious.
It's terrifying. It's a great movie, but it's terrifying.
I would not be shocked at all if there are some DIY bands out there who do siphon gas from other people's cars and get up to all kinds of antics. I mean, years ago there was it somebody in Coheed and Cambria got like arrested in the middle of their tour for doing some sketchy stuff.
I think it was the bass player. I don't want to call him out, but
it's always the bass player.
If I'm thinking of the thing you were, and I think it was close to us. It was like in
it was Mansfield,
the
wasn't
amphitheater,
it?
yeah, down there, and it was just like
yeah, man,
bummer.
Yeah. I hope the bass player is okay. I don't know if he's even still in the band anymore. Yeah, shout out to not living the rock star lifestyle, because when you do live the actual rock star lifestyle that people picture, you usually get arrested. So don't be one of those bands. But yeah, so speaking of that, when you transitioned to DIY touring, and here's the thing, guys, Aaron and I both actually did our first tours as big tours, where we were working for someone else rather than touring with a band we were playing in. So we kind of have the reverse experience of many, many people out there. And probably for you, the experience was you toured with your own band, and then maybe you got working for a bigger artist, or your band got bigger and you started playing large clubs like 500, 1,000 cap rooms. We both, for some very coincidental reason, have the opposite experience. But so Aaron, if you had to take your experience from professional touring at a major level, working for a big artist, and then coming back to DIY touring with your own band, what do you think is the one biggest thing that could be improved in DIY touring to make things more comfortable or pleasant or better in general for the artist and the promoter and the fans, just all around? Is there something that you think could be improved to make things better?
Boy, yeah.
It's a big question, I know.
I think it's sort of, we need to kind of identify a few of those metrics, like, in no particular order. First, we have, what do you think DIY is? They're the people who, are interesting in that they think if you go a step above and beyond spray painting your own T-shirts, you're a sellout. And then you have the people who, I run a 750 person club, but I run a 700, I'm doing it. It's my business. I've taken the time to grow it, or I'm in a band and I play 750 cap rooms, but we're still doing, maybe that person has built a team around themselves, but they're not getting their Netflix special. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So it's what, so, if I were to answer what, somebody who, has found a level of success where, I'd go so far as to say, in certain key areas, they have teams around the people who are on the teams around the artist. If I could choose anything, what I could take from that world and sort of apply to, and DIY, I'm just going to say, if you do it yourself, it's DIY, no matter how successful it is. And I would include businesses or bands or venue, whatever, who, if they have built a team around them, that's great. You're still doing it. It's DIY. Yeah. I'm not going to cut you off for having screen printed T-shirts.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think there is kind of a bad mentality, like you mentioned, if you're not printing your own
it's totally
shirts,
like somehow the people who have had, I'm sure before I was born in 90, been excluded from a Cool Kids Club. It's sort of, I don't know, and I've definitely found myself in a few areas where I'm like, this sure feels like a Cool Kids Club.
Yeah.
Like, like not good or bad, just like totally an observation. And I think it's, for some, maybe maybe that's a misconception. Maybe it's just people taking a lot of pride in their small local scene, which I think is important. But it's, I don't know, an interesting observation for sure. People do take it. There are some people who really take it seriously and, go so far as to like treat certain people different than other people. And I guess that's sort of what I'm kind of getting at. So maybe it's, if I could take one thing from pro and kind of, quo, air quotes.
Yeah.
But really, working for an artist much more successful than I will ever be,
Never say
sort of,
never.
hopefully, but and apply it to the world that I've been lucky enough to be part of for the last couple of years. Like small clubs. That sort of a thing. I'll play anywhere. I'm not too special for something. That kind of a tour. It's just being cognizant and aware that the people around you might have a different set of priorities than you, respecting that. And then kind of, I was told a long time ago, it's just as important to recognize like where you could be useful or where you should be in the music business as it is to recognize maybe where you shouldn't be. Because in a way, not being somewhere or not going somewhere can sometimes be just as helpful or productive or a positive thing as forcing yourself into something, or maybe more so if you're forcing yourself into something. So just being cool, man,
Yeah. And I think on that note, that not so much a physical location or a physical rank in the entertainment industry, but just from a mindset point of view.
Yeah.
Some DIY artists get so stuck up and they think they're like the best thing ever. And that attitude's just not going to help.
You got to be proud in what you do, but you got to keep it in perspective.
Yeah.
That something might be, and it's something I've had to learn, for sure. Like I'm not above and beyond that. Like I still go to the grocery store every other week, or you know what I mean? Like I'm not like nobody is. To be proud with what you do, but like keep that a positive thing, not something that you use against other people.
I would agree, and I mean, I've seen bands, particularly a band, who, no disrespect to, I think they were a really great band. Unfortunately, they're no longer a band, but I really enjoyed their music, and I booked them for a show. This was when I was in college, and our school venue was run by our professor, and she was great, and she just kind of oversaw things, and so the band had misconstrued. I was the production manager of the venue. I said, sometimes you're lucky and you find a parking space out front.
I've heard this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I told you this a long time ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, they parked in a loading zone, which was not a parking space, and got really upset about it and insisted on talking to our professor, who was the supervisor for the venue. Long story short, rather than calmly talking to said professor, the band got very upset, this one member representing them, and started yelling at her, and quickly realized that they lost the fight because she just said, well, I was going to give you the $50 to pay for this, but now, no way. Like, I'm sorry. You're the one who chose to not park in a parking spot. And what I'm trying to get at with this story is they had no idea who my professor was, and out of respect for her, I'm not going to name her or her clients, but she worked with some very, very amazing, talented artists and did some amazing things within the music industry. And I have no doubt that if she had been upset enough, she could have lifted a finger and made sure that this band would never have played any show over the DIY level ever.
Yeah.
She was very well connected, and that band did get banned from our venue at the school. And but I ran into this band the next year because they were on a big summer festival tour that I was doing, and so I talked to them about it. And the guy said to me, "Yeah, as soon as I opened my mouth, I realized I lost that."
Uh-oh.
And I was like, "Yeah, that was not a good move." And they recognized that, though. Like he was saying, as soon as it happened. So sometimes, you get more or you get better results if you ask for things nicely. And I can understand the frustration of getting a parking ticket. And, I totally accept responsibility that I should have said more clearly, sometimes you get lucky and find a parking spot. Make sure you don't park in the loading zone. I could have said that. But I also kind of assume...
I'll jump to your defense here, though, that if you're parking over like a white or yellow or blue maybe square painted on the ground that has a bunch of zigzagged other stripes in the middle of it. Well, and not to keep that going, but
yeah,
I'll
Well, I appreciate that.
You probably did your due diligence in that situation and stuff. The thing happened.
I definitely changed the language I used when advancing shows. From then on, it was always, you might find a parking spot, but make sure it's not a loading zone, you know? So I definitely learned a lesson there, and I'm sure that band did too. That band went on to be fairly successful before they broke up, and some of those members have gone on, and I think they played the last Warped Tour, like the last full year tour as a different band. But they were very successful, but there was also, like, I don't know the full details. There's some scandal about it too. So maybe they weren't quite done with their scandalous days.
It's all a learning experience, and it sounds like that's. I mean, I don't know how long they were on tour for before they, parked in a loading zone or whatever. But like, that could totally feed into like a mental, it's like, they could have been exhausted and like maybe not have reacted that way if they had just like woken up in their own beds that morning, or like the tour bubble's real for sure. And I think that's one thing that's important to be cognizant of is, read the news, make, like the world isn't as small as you think it is. It's small, but it's not as like tiny bubbly as you think it is when you're in a van. And
I have to jump in there and say they were the local opener.
Oh my God.
I mean, they drove from about an hour away, so it's not like they were just down the street or anything. Yeah. But they were the local opener, and it was actually the headliner was also from that area. But more established and had done tours, and they're unfortunately no longer a band either, which I was really bummed about. But they're also doing really cool things. One of their guys has a record label and publicity company down in New York. Once again, I would love to mention them because he's doing cool things, but if I mention them, then people will know who the other band was. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna throw anyone under the bus. But that band was really cool, and they almost got a parking ticket, but they were only in the loading zone with like their front tires, so the guy let them go. And we found out that corner actually has a camera, and somebody's watching it with CCTV, and like if they see somebody parked there, they radio like the meter person on the street and like go give them a ticket.
Big government's watching.
And so even though the band was like, oh, we're so sorry, we can move, he said, well, unfortunately, since I got called out, I have to write you a ticket. Otherwise I get in trouble. So that was a real bummer. And
learning experience.
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess I wouldn't say that's a difference between professional touring and DIY touring. Like there are egos at professional tours. But I want to drive home the point.
Plenty of learning experiences for sure.
Yeah.
Until you could be a doctor, and until you do something, you just we haven't done it.
We all learn from mistakes. Like, I learned in that situation that, I should be more clear with what I'm saying. People hear what they want to hear. That band thought that I was giving them permission to park in the loading zone, which is not what I meant at all. But I could see how that would be easily misconstrued as that. So, yeah. But I would agree with what you said on how to improve DIY touring. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And from my perspective, I would say just more bands doing what Aaron is doing with Suburban Samurai and just getting data points and collecting that and just working at it as much as possible and not expecting gigs to come to you. Or same thing for Pickwick Commons. They're actively working on it all the time. They have a long-term strategy. And I see a lot of DIY bands who don't have a long-term strategy. And I think that's something that really hurts bands because, people say when you're making a business, the first thing you should do is create a mission statement. And that will help guide you. So I think for a band, maybe not a mission statement, but having a strategy of what we're going to do and goals with results that you can achieve. But that's totally going to be a whole nother episode. We're already
a rabbit hole.
Yeah. And we're just about at the 40-minute mark already, and we still have several bullet points to get through. So this first episode here may be a little over. We'll see. But we'll try to keep it in concise, and we don't want the Better Band Bureau podcast to be something that you dread listening to. We want it to be something fun with, side notes and stories and anecdotes and things like that. But we also want to make sure that DIY bands can learn something from this. So I'll try to not talk so much.
And I'm guilty as charged.
Oh well, we'll both be executed by the Axeman next time they play a show. And there's actually guitars. I'm not going to ramble because I just said I wasn't going to ramble. One thing, and I guess we should try to keep this short, but there's a lot of overlap between pro tours and DIY tours. What do you think is one of the things that sticks out with things that are the same? And obviously, things that we take for granted are like, you get on stage and play music, you drive to the next city. Do you think there's anything that is surprising that there's an overlap?
Dang it. I was going to start with that. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously, as you said, there is a group of people who are artistic or like tech savvy in nature who go from one building and then either make a lot of noise or support people who make a lot of noise. And then at some point they're in a different building and they do that too. And then at some point they don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's that. But something surprising? Oh man, that's a tough one.
I'll be honest, I can't think of anything either.
Well, it's the key. It's like the surprising part. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I had been surprised, like, oh, this is here too.
Maybe not so much surprising, but something that people might not expect. You know, not like you're like, oh,
So
my
maybe
God,
not
this is
surprising
happening,
for
but
the person on tour, but for like somebody at home, if you were to tell them, kind of a innocent bystander.
you could say that.
I think, I mean, if you're away from home, you're away from home.
And it's not a vacation. It's not a party.
Yeah, I'll definitely segue into, assuming that the conversation's about the people who aren't on vacation when they're
Yeah.
touring, because how great would that be? But it's, that's a common thread. And it's maybe not surprising, like maybe that's probably not the right word, as much as, oh yeah, that again. That kind of a thing. And I think in my experience, that's, I can partition myself and live out of a suitcase all the live long day, but it's when you start to consider your other priorities that, maybe below what you're doing or maybe much more important, but, this is your job. And so you do have to kind of reconcile what it means to be away. And that's also on the people at home too. Yeah. And, another thing to be kind of wary of is it's probably also going through everybody else's head who's out there. So I think that's, not to like totally seriousify the conversation, but I think it's very real. And it's something that, is worth exploring, at least for 5 minutes while you're sitting down before you take off is, how to prepare for that.
I think that's very true, very applicable to anyone, and also a great segue to our next bullet point, which is the mental toll of touring. I referenced the story earlier about the tour that I actually didn't feel comfortable continuing with. And it wasn't anything that I didn't enjoy what I was doing, but it was that my heart wasn't fully in it and my head wasn't in it. And I was aware of this, and I knew that somebody else would do a better job than I would. Mm-hmm. And so because of my mental state at that time, and, I wasn't, facing any mental health issues or anything, thankfully, because that's one of the most difficult things to overcome is a mental health issue. But I just knew that on that particular tour, I was not as happy as I had been on other tours. And thankfully, when I talked to my supervisor about it, I just explained, I know somebody else will do a better job than I can on this. And I think he really appreciated that I had the candor to talk to him about it and say, I'm not doing a good job. Because the last thing anybody wants to do is go to somebody working for them and say, you're not doing a good job. And I don't know if he already had an inkling of that by looking at my productivity while I was working. I would hazard a guess no, because I was still being fairly competitive with other people who were out there. But I knew that I had a higher standard for myself, and I was not meeting that standard. So due to that, because I knew I wasn't fully in that, I didn't have my head in the game, I decided to leave the tour. And that kind of goes to the mental toll thing. And obviously, I would never say just leave a tour. That's totally irresponsible. Like, no one should do that. I worked it out, and we figured out somebody else to come out and replace me. And, I didn't just say I'm leaving. I said, I'll give you as long as you need to find somebody else. Cause this was like 2 weeks into a 7-week tour or something like that. It was a major summer festival tour. So, I didn't want to just bail on them and burn bridges, because that's something else in the music business. You don't want to burn bridges. You never know. You might upset the wrong person, and then that's it. Word gets around very, very quickly in the music business, as most people in DIY bands have probably already learned, and if they haven't yet, they will.
Yeah, it's no different when you start doing more. It's all the same. Yeah.
Yeah, the mental toll of touring, it can be really incredibly straining, because not only are you working, 12, 15, probably longer days sometimes. It's a lot of hours, but you're also living in a tin can. Whether it's a van or a bus, you're living in a tin can. You're in close quarters with who knows how many other people. Well, I guess a bus holds 12 people and a van holds 12 to 15 people. So it's potentially about the same. You're just in a much, much tighter space if you have 12 people in a van than if you have 12 people in a bus.
I mean, you could be as extroverted. I am not. But you could be as extroverted as they come, and you got to have you time.
Yeah.
At least, at the very least, pull the curtain and pretend you're having you time, even if you're in a bus with 12 other people. And that totally feeds back into the mental health thing. The physicality of what you might be doing, that takes a toll. Whether you notice it or not, it's if you do it long enough, you're going to notice a diminished capacity.
Yeah.
For, hope to God it's not decision making or
Driving,
remembering what your name is, but it could be if you let it go long enough.
That does remind me, one time we were on an off day, we stopped at a Walmart. Here I am bringing up Walmart again. I'm really not a fan of Walmart myself, but sometimes it's the only option. This was, I want to say, Nebraska, but I didn't know that at the time. And it was 8 in the morning, and I got off of the bus and walked in and bought some snacks and whatever. And as I'm walking out, I saw one of the guys pushing the carts. He's like, "Hey, so what state are we in?" And he looked at me like I had two heads. I think he said Nebraska. And then I saw his reaction. Was like, "Yeah, sorry, I just woke up on that bus out there." And he's kind of "Oh, okay," but he was still looking at me like, "Dude, you don't know where you are." And that's just kind of the mental state sometimes. I could have pulled out my phone and checked, but it was just easier. It probably said it on the receipt. I probably could have looked at the receipt and it would have had the address of the store on it or something. But I was just 8 in the morning. I'm like, dude, I don't know where I am. If the bus had left me for whatever reason, I would have been so lost. Thankfully, I did have my phone in my pocket, but I would not have known where to start.
I guess
call the bus driver.
As weird as that is, see, I've had sort of a fun experience with that before, or not that sounds particularly negative, but discombobulated. I mean, if I'm in a bus, I'm just, you got at a certain point, you got to kind of learn to trust the people you work with to do the thing that they're doing to work with you. And so when I'm on a bus, I pay attention to when the bus starts rolling, so I can go to sleep. When the bus stops rolling, so I know, oh my God, I'm late to go do whatever because I should have been up already, which thankfully really has happened. But every little bit I'll check Google Maps to see if I got 10 more minutes of sleep before I have to get up. So I've never really paid close attention to this on a bus, but on a van tour with Subsam, the first time we drove, it was a rough cut, back from Ohio to I guess it would have been Pennsylvania, or just kind of that kind of hugging the lakes, but kind of coming back east. Forgive my poor geography skills on the spot, but I was in the passenger seat, I think, and so I was up front, but I wasn't driving, and I was just kind of in my own head or on my phone or snoozing or something, and during the day, and all of a sudden I saw "Welcome to West Virginia," and I hadn't taken that route before, or I had not ever noticed that there's totally a little pocket of West Virginia that extends upward.
Yeah,
between.
I know what you're talking about. You're going into Harrisburg, right?
Pennsylvania. That's to the east. It was coming from like Ohio or something like that. And we were going to Pittsburgh. And I just remember being like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? And then, I mean, if the sign says I'm in West Virginia, I suppose I'm in West Virginia. So I've had a little fun with that.
Yeah.
Like a few of those where it's like, oh, wow.
I have a similar experience where I moved cross country earlier this year. I can't remember what was before West Virginia. It was probably Virginia, I guess, or something. But I thought we were just going to go straight into Pennsylvania. But then all of a sudden we were in West Virginia for literally like 8 miles.
Yeah.
And,
it was like super quick.
Yeah. And this was coming to Harrisburg. So West Virginia must have 2 spots like that on the interstate. But I kind of feel bad like checking West Virginia off of my states I've visited list just for that 8 miles. But I'm probably not going to get another chance because I've hung up my touring shoes and that's something I don't do anymore.
Did you stop at like a rest station? Or a
No.
Oh, no.
The Airbnb I was staying at was in Harrisburg. So we were like 30 minutes from getting there. So it's like, and we'd been driving from Nashville. So it's like a 10-hour drive. We're just like, we're not stopping. Like, we're just going to go. So I have not walked on the ground in West Virginia, unfortunately.
I don't know. I don't want to throw you
think
under
that's the qualifier?
The bus.
Yeah.
Because I was hoping you'd say yes, because I'd say the same thing. Like, I don't know if it counts, but I've played the crap out of Virginia. But I'd have to hear a city name to like say if I've done it. I'm sure I have, but I don't have a memory of a load in West Virginia somewhere. But I did use the bathroom at Bass Pro Shops.
There you go.
During that 8-mile stretch. So I'm sure I did a show. I can't remember it, but I know I used the restroom.
Well, you know, it's funny. Like West Virginia is one of those states. Like I can't name a single city either. And I think there's probably going to be a listener who's
West
like,
Virginia,
"Hey,
I apologize."
But I don't think West Virginia has like a major city. I think they're one of those states. Like I hate to say it, kind of like Vermont, where everything goes on in Boston or Montreal or Albany area.
Yeah.
We're lucky here in Vermont to have a great venue called Higher Ground that does have some decent bands come through, like decently. I don't mean like they're decent musically. They're very talented. We have
totally. Well, they've just got that
bands
capacity to like. They've got their own space, 2 spaces inside of the space, and then they've got the presents portion of that where they're able to do a lot of different and cool stuff.
To clarify what I mean by decent, I mean just like decent size, like relatively well known, or like they had Bush play the Lake Champlain fair a few days ago, which I don't think that was a Higher Ground thing, but like we do get some fairly large artists through here. But I digress. I think West Virginia is probably one of those things where there's no like absolute major city, and they might get some bands through. It's something like that, what we have here, but they're not, a major stop. They're like a tertiary market.
I would totally but mostly uneducated. I would wonder if somebody from West Virginia would react in the same way that somebody in Vermont would react when somebody from California can't place them on a map.
Yeah.
or not to pick on but like somebody from, that's the big one on the left, or like, Texas or Florida, the easily recognizable shapes.
I have to say, I'm looking at Google Maps on my iPad right now, and I see city names here in West Virginia, and like I don't recognize any of them. Because let's see, Roanoke, is that Virginia or West Virginia? Yeah, that's Virginia. So the thing is that Interstate 81, looking at it, is mostly in Virginia, and then just before it hits Pennsylvania, it's West Virginia for like a small time. And then it continues on into Pennsylvania. But looking at the map, Lexington is Kentucky. Like, I do not see a major city here in West Virginia. And it's like the same thing. If I zoom out and look at Vermont, like Burlington's not on the map because it's not a major city. It only has 40,000 people. Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's one of those states. Another one, I've been to every single state around Kentucky, but I haven't been to Kentucky.
Oh.
I've been in Cincinnati and looked across the river and seen Kentucky, which at that point the river was very, very wide. Because I remember I texted you, there was like a poster for the tour you were on at the time, and the venue had flooded. And I was like, "Are you guys here?
Story.
Like, what's going on?" And then you guys had rescheduled,
God.
but
yeah,
because the tour I was on didn't actually need that main stage, we could.
I totally forgot about that. That was so. There were like a few of those where like is a day before or ahead of the other one.
Yeah, small world.
Oh God, well, I mean, if you feel like it's time, I have a stories of tours, shows, drives gone wrong that kind of fits right into that.
Yeah, let's hit that bullet point first, and then go on to the physical toll.
Oh, well, that'd be perfect because this had a physical toll on me, as
Wonderful.
well as a mental. I would never have thought of that if you didn't bring that up. But that was so cool. I remember. So it must have been Cincinnati, right? It was the shed over there, amphitheater,
which was by the little tiny water park.
Yeah, I remember them saying we had to. I think we were coming from Indiana, maybe Evansville or something like that, and we were going to end. There were 2 legs of the tour, and it was I think it was Evansville, and then I think it was Cincinnati or whatever the city is. And then we were all going to go home for a week and then fly back and start leg 2. And but we ended up totally punting because I think the amphitheater was flooded. I don't know if I never walked out back to look at it, but I think it was clearly right by the river. And I heard story the house dude was like, oh yeah, there were snakes on the lawn, that had come up from the water, and totally terrifying. And but it's that whole process of well, you know how we all thought we had a show tomorrow? No, I guess we're all going home tomorrow, huh?
Yeah,
and just that. Oh, it's amazing how large teams like that can work together to just do something that. Sitting here right now sounds totally bonkers, and that's tip of the iceberg. It's just you just got to sit there and rebook travel or something, and that's nothing. And
then come back and do it a week later, play that show.
Yeah, I mean at that point, most everything was set, and you're kind of executing what you had planned or advanced. I don't know if I would have thought of that, but now that you mention it, yeah, that's a memorable. That was an interesting one because it was such a quick turnaround, and then.
Yeah. Well, I pulled that up on Google Maps as well, and ironically, the venue is called Riverbend Music Center. I didn't remember that, but it should have been called Underwater Music Center.
I remember we stayed the airport hotel that we must have punted and stayed at or moved the dates, or I don't remember how this went, but at some point when we must have gone back there, or maybe I bet what it was we booked travel out of that airport or something. So we ended up still staying at an airport hotel that I think was across in Kentucky or whatever it was that we were just talking about. That's how that ties in.
Yeah, Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky International Airport. I can see it right here on the map.
And I still get emails from that hotel
oh, jeez.
Hey.
That's the worst.
And it's not an automated thing too. It's a hotel rep years later.
Because you booked how many rooms do you think you booked?
30 or 40.
Yeah.
And it was
it's a big tour.
Yeah. Somebody finds out who it is and they are excited and to appreciate that they can play a part in something, which is really, really cool. And I always sort of smile when I get I've gotten it 3 or 4 times since then, and this was probably 2014 that the tour happened, so a while ago. And
yeah, that venue is interesting. Thankfully, I did not see the snakes because, respect for snakes. They have a very defined purpose in nature. I don't like big snakes. I don't like seeing them. I would run
mental
away.
Toll. Yeah,
exactly, mental toll.
Yes, me too.
But I do remember the lawn was open so people could sit on the lawn. And it was AstroTurf. This is the only venue I've ever seen where the lawn is AstroTurf. I was on a summer festival tour. It was just baking in the sun, and people would sit on it and dude, how are you not getting burned right now? Literally, the water was just coming up halfway through the seats of the amphitheater.
It
was just about the level of the stage. It was maybe a foot under the stage. So it was probably 4 or 5 feet of water filling up the pit in the first 20, 30 rows of seats, I would guess. It was, like you said, a while ago, so I don't remember too well. But that was an interesting day. And the next day we had to go to Canada, so that was fun. Overnight border crossings where you have a show starting at 11 and load in.
Nobody's lied about getting a DUI in the last however many years.
Yeah, so that's a mental toll thing too. Is going to Canada. I'm not trying to make Canada sound awful. I'm just saying crossing the border where In case you didn't know, if you're on a tour bus and you're crossing the border control agents make you wake up. And I'm sure you've been through that. But
at the very least, you got to
that,
like poke your head out of the bunk. And
that's something that most people probably wouldn't imagine. They're like, oh yeah, tour bus, you just sleep through. It's like, nope, you still go through immigration. Like, even though it's all advanced and your name's on a list, like they have to check the box, be like, I saw this person, I saw the passport. No one else is hiding on the bus.
I'd go so far as to say, like, that's just, you got to wake up, and it'd be better to be woken up so okay, we're at the border, things are happening, rather than like not be woken up and then wake up at 7:30 in the morning when you should be an hour north side of the border or something, like with a flat tire on a butt, like, or not having been woken up when the border crossing isn't going well for some reason.
That is very true. And speaking of waking up on a bus when there is something going wrong, this is one of my favorite tour stories. Thankfully, everyone was okay. Everything was fine. We got our bus back later the next day, so it wasn't major damage or anything. This was just at the start of the tour. We did 3 shows, and then we had a day off. And this was that day off after the first 3 shows. And we were driving from Ventura, California to somewhere near Phoenix, Arizona, and climbing the mountains at 6:15, 6:30 in the morning, out of California into Arizona. All of a sudden, I smelled smoke, and I was like, that's not good. And I opened my curtain on the bunk, and I see smoke. I'm like, yep, that's not good. So I walked up to the lounge and saw a few people sitting there. I'm like, what's going on? And then I just hear, oh, we're stopping. And the bus like pulls over, and our driver jumped out. Like, I've never seen him move that fast before, and ran to the back, and I heard like doors and panels opening and stuff and thumping. And I'm like, okay. And then he comes back on the bus and just all chill says, all right, I just put out a fire.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, just imagining like all the horrible stories I've seen in the news of like buses burning down. And thankfully, I think we were okay in this situation because it was in the engine compartment, which is obviously like isolated. It wasn't like on the bus, it was in the back. But I'm still sure if he had tried to keep going, or if he hadn't stopped, like it wouldn't have
put itself
spread.
Out.
Yeah, exactly. And so that happened, which was not what I expected. But then, of course, we had to get on a different bus, and we got split up onto all the other production buses from this tour. A few of them pulled over to help us out.
So you were able to move on and kind of...
Yeah. And so I wasn't sure when we were going to see the bus again. So I just grabbed my suitcase, and I had all my clothes under my mattress in the bunk. That was like my system was like, just everything's accessible there.
Yeah.
So I grabbed my suitcase and just like dumped everything out of my bunk into my suitcase in my bag. I was like, okay, I'm good. We can go. Which wasn't necessary because we got the bus back later the next day, which was okay. But just in case, if we'd never seen that bus again or something.
Flyer, so yeah.
But I remember the funniest thing, this is where the mental toll comes in. Just things like that are so shocking because I had to wake up somebody else on the bus. So I led by saying like, hey, like everything's okay. Nothing's wrong anymore, but we have to switch buses. Everything is fine. We had a fire. The fire is now out. And literally the person had slept through the whole thing until I said fire. And then the curtain just goes, shh, we're on fire. And I'm like, no. We were. Everything is okay now. No need to panic. Like, we're safe.
And that's how you remember that person.
Yes. I'm still friends with that person to this day, and we laugh about that moment. But it's like the whole lead up of like, everything's okay. That was all like just zoned out. And then the first thing they heard was fire.
I guess that's probably what like simultaneous surprise and disappointment, they can't sleep longer, sounds like.
Yes. It was a day off, and that tour was famous for its barbecues and parties the night before a day off. I was not one of those people. I was in bed at like, I think 1:30 or 2. I got a good 4 hours of sleep. This person was up until bus call, which I think was like 4 or 4:30. Yeah, that person got like 2 hours of sleep. And I felt bad for waking them up, but I felt it was better than leaving them in a bunk on a tour bus that was about to get hooked up to a tow truck and driven back to California to get repaired, and then driven to Arizona for like
it's either get off now or we'll see you in 4 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Hope you can do your job with your phone.
But so obviously that was a very stressful event for all of us because it's like, okay, well, like when are we getting our bus back? What's going on? And thankfully, the bus company we were with had their like central location with all their extra buses in Arizona, in Phoenix. So
wow.
they
Nice.
gave us a bus to use for the next day, just like to have somewhere with air conditioning to hang out.
Is that where you like picked up the bus? Like that's where the bus came from?
Our bus that
Yeah.
blew up, yeah, it was
Okay.
based
Oh,
in
wow.
Arizona, but they took it back to LA because that was closer.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, they would have had to tow it like another 6 hours or something. But yeah, so the next day we got back on like random buses. We were supposed to have our bus, but it just didn't show up. So I just found the bus we'd been with and asked the driver, I was like, hey, like our bus didn't show up. Can we just hitch a ride? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. So, and then we got there and there's a bus there waiting for us. So there's just some miscommunication, but it didn't have enough bunks for all of us. It had
Not nice.
like a double bunk, which was bigger for like the Rockstar or whatever.
That's the oh boy, I'm not gonna remember the name because I've never had the privilege.
Yeah.
The condos. I think it's,
Yeah, that
I
actually,
might
that
I might
sounds-
be outing
that sounds
myself as
right.
an idiot for not remembering that, but it's
That sounds applicable. But either way, instead of having 3 bunks stacked, there were only 2. So you had a
Yeah.
lot more headroom and it was really nice. But it wouldn't have fit everybody.
nice
So
for
we're
the
like-
8 people who got it, huh?
Yeah. Well, no, it was one set was like that. So the others
Just on
were all
one.
9. Or were all
I
3.
see. So
But-
like 2 people lucked out with those.
Yeah. It would
Oh
have.
wow. Yeah.
It would have fit 11 people instead of 12. It's like, well, whoever would typically have the top bunk, I guess, would be the person who doesn't get the bunk. And I was like, well, that's
Oh,
not my
I
bunk,
see.
so I'm cool. My bunk's still there. But then we got our bus back at the end of the night, which was a big relief. And we weren't sure it was going to happen. And he literally got there like right before bus call. And we're scrambling to pull everything out because we
Wow.
stored it in that bus already to be ready to go because we weren't sure if he was going to show up in time. And so then he
Transfer
showed
back,
up and we're like
get on.
pulling everything out and shoving it in the other bus. We're like, that was close, and like got on the bus and left. That was an interesting day, but I'll avoid the side stories. But that actually does tie into the physical toll because we had to scramble and shove everything into the other bus after we had just worked 12 hours and we're like all rested and like, our day's over. We get to chill now. And then like, nope, get everything off this bus and put it on the other bus and you have 10 minutes to do it. So that was something that happened. So that's a good segue to the physical toll of touring, which I think we've pretty much covered already. You know, the just working really long days is probably the biggest
That's
thing. Like,
kind of
doing that.
And I mean, on top of if you're like a systems guy or like, you know, merch on a festival, anybody on a festival, really, it's anybody outside. But I mean, you could be, you know, the person who's, you know, white gloving it the whole time. And like, if you're doing your job, yeah, the hours are very long and like you don't get to experience a regular sleep schedule. You kind of just have to deal.
And I have to say, I think for me, most of the tours I did were that summer music festival. I did that 3 years. So it was nice because I could be in bed by 11 if I wanted to and get up at 6:37 and start my day at 8 and then work till 8. You know, like that kind of tour was very conducive to having a somewhat human sleep schedule.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to ask, like, when you were on the road, how many days in a row was the longest you went without having a day off? Because it's like compounding interest.
I mean, at a certain point, you kind of just turn into a machine, but
Yeah.
machines also break down or need maintenance at some point, or would enjoy caffeine or something. Boy, I think my longest was we were, you know, outside every day, the festival run, and I think it was probably 13 or 14 days, which sort of took us all the way from, wasn't Baltimore, but like the Baltimore, you know,
Yeah.
venue, down the coast, a few days in Florida, back up the other side of Florida, through Louisiana. I don't think we stopped in Mississippi, but like Texas all the way. And we dumped out in San Diego. And then that was like, I guess, 13, 14 days worth of. And I think for my arena gig, I wasn't pulling 13, 14 days straight.
Because the artist is
Yeah.
kind of setting some
it's-
limitations on that.
Yeah, that artist had like a very nice. I was very lucky to get to experience a schedule like that. But towards the end of the time that I had spent in that camp, so far, we were doing like there were a few stadium shows speckled in, and obviously that's, you know, the way that we had executed that was to have a load-in day the day before the show.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think the performers probably were still sort of on a similar, you know, show off, show or whatever schedule. But you know, it was much more active on the part of the crew side.
Yeah.
You
didn't get that day off.
No, we would pull you know, anywhere between, you know, probably 4 and 8 in a row, or, you know, 8 or 9 or something. But at the end of the day, that's not 14 or 15, or right. You know, and that's you know, very different. You know, you have catering on that kind of a tour.
True. Yeah.
Well, which I guess you would on a festival, but it's just different. Yeah. So I kind of run the gambit. I've done one-offs, and I've done 14 days in a row.
Yeah, that's definitely tough. I have to say, thankfully, the most I ever did was 12 in a row on a summer festival tour. It's something that I would not want to repeat again. And I feel bad for the people who, the last time that tour went cross country, they had like 20 or 21 shows in a row. I could not even imagine doing that. And they did it, but that would not have been something that I would be looking forward to ever.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's extreme. I don't know why they couldn't fit just one off day and then do like 10 and 10 or something, but it is what it is. So those are some stories of shows and tours and drives going wrong. We definitely rambled on with those, but I think those are some fun stories. Hopefully people will enjoy them and learn that some things you just can't control. Like, things are going to go wrong on tour.
Just got to take it.
You have to be prepared for it. So here's our last bullet point, which is how to be mentally prepared for the strain of touring. It's a big topic, and I think there's a lot to cover. Personally, I would think, and this is just something small, and it's not like being prepared for the whole tour, but just the night before, like when I go to bed, I look at like our PDF tour book or pick up the actual tour book if there's one handy and say like, okay, this is where we are tomorrow. It's this venue, this city. Okay. And then I look at Google Maps and say like, okay, so this is kind of how I think we're going to get there. And this is where in the country it is. And then kind of like think through my head and like, oh, do I know someone near here? And that kind of stuff. Because then if I know someone, I'll be like, hey, are you coming out to the show? Yeah. That just is like a minor thing that helped keep me sane on a day-to-day basis. Just the awareness of where I was going to wake up, or where I should be waking up if the bus doesn't catch on fire and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, everybody's got to have like that thing, and like whether it's like more noticeable or not, or even if it's like a mental thing you repeat to yourself, or like a tradition before bed, like, you know, like it's you got to have whatever it is, you got to have that thing. Yeah,
it's definitely not one size fits all. My little trick there might work for some people, but
hopefully that it's not thing, like drugs or alcohol. Hopefully that's not what it is. Unfortunately, it is for some people, but
that's very true. And
yeah,
I would say be very cautious with that, especially on a DIY level. Like,
oh yes,
if you're all driving and you're all in a van, like there's just no room for that, to be honest. Like
DIY versus if you're on a bus, and that's making the assumption that your bus tours put together properly, which it may not be, but it like there could be an argument against it. But I'll just say, like, if you're calling something a DIY tour, like chances are it's much less structure. There's less infrastructure, and you know, a lot more places where like risk can kind of creep in, you know, and
there's just
like,
no
avoid the easy stuff to avoid, which includes but is not limited to
the influence.
Yeah, just, you know, and some people have a much more difficult time with that than others. I'm thankful that that's never been a struggle of mine, but I know that there have been other people. Yeah, I've known other people well who have struggled with that sort of a thing, and it's, you know, it's always more to it than, you know, how we're making it sound. But it's all the reason more to like have that one positive thing that you can kind of, you know, go to, that place or that activity. Like I'm a fan of. I've seen so many. You know, I'm a fan of not saying like, oh, I have a day off. It's because with what I had done, it was more often than not like a non-show day.
Yeah.
But I did have time, and so I would hunt for the closest movie theater and go see whatever's playing, or, you know, because then you've got like, oh, yeah, Aaron's going to cheap out and he's going to try to walk there if he can. So there's a nice walk, and you know, freaking put you out of your element for a little bit.
Yeah, do some like normal person stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And although I have to say, the one time I went to a movie while I was on tour, I like slept through the movie because I was so exhausted. It was Ant-Man, the original one, from like 4 years ago. Good movie.
That was one of the ones I saw on tour.
Oh, really?
I was in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Nice.
And I remember because there was a lot of work to do before and after I went and saw the movie. But I saw the movie, though.
Yeah, I saw it in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. The festival I was on had a
so disclaimer, if you haven't seen Ant-Man, it's this good that we both remember exactly where we were.
Exactly. Oh, that was another day where we had a day off and the bus had to go get inspected, but the hotel wasn't ready. So we had to figure out there's like no Uber, no Lyft, no taxi. And we were dropped off in Gettysburg like National Park because other people on the tour were doing like the service day, which apologies like for not doing a service day, but I selfishly wanted to enjoy my one day off rather than planting trees. So we hopped on like this little tourist shuttle, which does different loops like every hour. So we actually saw the whole tour twice, except like the little part that goes in a different loop. It was really fun, and the people were nice, and we filled up most of the bus. And we were on that bus literally 2 hours to do like what would have been like a 15-minute drive.
Nice.
But we just didn't want to sit in the park for an hour doing nothing. We were like, let's get on the bus and see downtown, and then come back to the park, and then finally get to the hotel, which was still not open. So, or like our rooms weren't ready. So there's like a little shopping mall, and we're like walking through there with backpacks and suitcases because our bus was gone. So,
oh no,
good times. Yeah, that's where we saw the movie, and they had like these little Minions cutouts, so that was cool.
Yeah, it's like any little, like there's a way to do it and a way to not do it, but like any sort of tether to reality. And I know it's like, if you're like a machine and you're in the zone, then you just don't want to be bothered by like going to see Ant-Man. But like, there's a point where you're gonna want to go and see Ant-Man just for 2 hours, just to, forget or to be distracted or just like to be entertained by something other than, what for however long like seems to be your reality.
I agree. That's something, and there were, I want to say 4 of us, maybe 5 went to see the movie. And it was great because like we all knew each other, but we never got the chance to like go do something together.
Yeah.
And maybe I'd hang out with 1 or 2 of those people, do something, or hang out with another one some other time. But we'd never done like a group thing on a day off where it's like, oh, like half our team can go watch a movie. Like that was really cool. And even though I fell asleep, it was still like a
get
fun
to know the people.
Time. Exactly. Those are actually the people I interact with most from that tour. Those 3 or 4 other people who went to see the movie that day, which I think probably is not because of the movie. It's like I went to the movie because I had gravitated towards those people. Yeah. But it shows that like a lasting connection was being built in that process, even if that wasn't like the sole thing that.
There's a lot of value in that. Yeah. For sure. I mean, you're all there, you know what's going on, and you're probably all stressed and, you're tired. And it's like, you're taking it for like what it is. Like, we're all tired. Let's go do something fun. Exactly. Like that's just how it's got to be done. And I got to say, we're at the 90-minute mark here, but oh my gosh, I think that we obviously had a lot to share. And we'll learn to be more concise in future episodes, and maybe I'll be absolutely brutal with cutting things out here in Pro Tools. Who knows? Like, if it makes sense, I'll leave it. But we're gonna turn it into 40 minutes, but leave that bit, and you're all gonna wonder what James cut out. And you're gonna have to tune in next week. Yes. Speaking of episode number 2, that will be an introduction to both Aaron and myself and a little background on how we got started in the music business. So be sure to check that out. Thanks so much for tuning in to this first episode of the Better Band Bureau podcast. We hope to have you back for the next episode. Until then, as always, just keep rocking. Any final words, Aaron? I'm really looking forward to keeping on doing this. This is awesome. And I hope people who listen are having as much fun as I think we're having. Agreed. I think that if we can get this going, people will really have a lot to learn. And we're always open to questions. Totally. So either look up the Better Band Bureau on Facebook, join our group, and join the discussion, or just email support@thebetterbandbureau.com,
If you want to reach both of us, I can forward that on to Aaron. Or if you just want to have like a topic suggestion or something, email james@thebetterbandbureau.com, and I will add that to our list of ideas for next time.
Rockin'.
All right. Well, Aaron, thanks so much for being a part of this. I'm looking forward to the next time. Here we go. Better Band Bureau. Keep rocking, everyone. All right, that's it for episode 1 of the Better Band Bureau podcast. We definitely enjoyed recording this. I do have one quick favor to ask. If you're willing to go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes and leave a review, or at the very least a rating for the Better Band Bureau podcast, that is a huge help to us getting this podcast launched. So we would really appreciate that. Go ahead and listen to episode 2 and then episode number 3, because the first 3 episodes are all coming out today. And after that, episodes 4, 5, 6, etc. will be coming out every week, Tuesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So go ahead, check out the next 2 episodes, and join our Facebook group. Just search The Better Band Bureau on Facebook. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and keep rocking.